You ever get that feeling when you just know something's not right? Like your gut won't stop yelling that the person you've given your all to is making a fool out of you. That's exactly what happened to me. And honestly, I should have trusted my instincts from the very start instead of trying to play the chill, easygoing girlfriend who doesn't ask too many questions. People love to pretend they know the whole story, but they weren't there for the 5 years Zach and I spent building what I thought was a solid life together. I was 27, finally with a man who seemed to have himself figured out. Or so I believed. Zach was 33, worked some corporate office job buried in spreadsheets, and everyone always said we looked perfect together. And in many ways we did. I put my entire self into making us work. Always showing up for him, always making sure he felt supported. Sure, we had rough patches like anyone, but I was the glue keeping us together. When he pulled back and got moody, I was the one reeling him back in, reminding him of what we shared. When he'd lose himself in that ridiculous gaming setup of his, instead of paying me attention, I'd find ways to draw his focus back. But if I'm honest, Zach never matched my energy. I was fully invested in us in a way he never truly appreciated. I gave him everything, my time, my effort, my heart, and I thought he was doing the same. We were even talking about marriage, about building a future. I'd started browsing rings online, dropping little hints about styles I liked, pushing things forward because someone had to. Zach needed nudging sometimes, and I didn't mind being that person. I thought we had an understanding. I thought we were unshakable. Looking back, there were signs I brushed aside. Like the way he'd look at me when I called him out, as if I was more of an annoyance than a partner. Or when he'd joke that I was intense, when I was really just passionate about us. I chalked it up to him being emotionally closed off, like a lot of men are. They need help sorting through feelings, right? I figured I was being a good girlfriend by keeping us on track, making sure he wasn't just coasting through without putting effort in. When he'd come home from work and vanish into his computer room for hours, I'd bring him food, try to start conversations, suggest we watch something together. But he always had a reason. He had to decompress, finish a project, whatever. So I'd sit alone with Netflix while listening to the non-stop clicking of his keyboard. And when we were out and some girl laughed too hard at his jokes or touched his arm, I noticed. I'd call it out later, and he'd act like I was being paranoid. "She's just being nice, Eden," he'd say, like I was some insecure girlfriend who couldn't handle normal interactions. But I knew what those women were doing, testing limits, seeing how far they could go with a taken man. And Zach never shut it down the way he should have. Still, I thought that's what love was. Fighting for someone, even if they don't fight as hard for you. Guarding what we had, even when he couldn't see the threats in front of him. Then last month, Zach calls to tell me his cousin Nicole is coming to stay with him for a night while she's in town for work. Just one night, he says, and he wanted to let me know since we usually spent evenings together. I'd met Nicole a couple times. Nice enough, though a little too polished for my taste. Zach sounded almost nervous telling me, which should have been a red flag. But I told him it was fine. Even though I was annoyed about losing one of our nights, I swallowed it, because that's what I did. I bent for him. The thing is, Zach was weird about his space. Protective, particular about everything. He hated when I left a mug out or moved his mail. So suddenly opening his place to family felt strange. And Nicole, well, she was gorgeous, successful, put together in a way that made other women feel small. Every family event I'd seen her at, she had a way of commanding attention without even trying. Zach lit up around her, became more alive, more like the man I first fell for. I tried not to let it get to me. Told myself not to be the jealous girlfriend. But deep down, I felt the shift. He'd been pulling away for a while anyway. More time on his computer, less affection, less talking. After 5 years, you notice the difference. He'd started locking his phone, taking calls outside on the balcony with the door shut. I couldn't ignore it. So when he mentioned Nicole staying, part of me wondered if this was him testing boundaries. But I played it cool, acted unbothered, because that's what secure girlfriends are supposed to do. Even though every instinct in me screamed that something was wrong. The next evening, after Nicole was supposedly gone, I went to Zach's place. I had a key, of course. I'd had one for years. I let myself in like always. Zach was still at work, but immediately, I felt it. The place didn't feel the same. The air smelled different, cleaner somehow, but with this faint floral scent I didn't recognize. Something that definitely wasn't mine. I went to use the bathroom, and that's when I saw it. Long, dark strands of hair caught in the drain, way longer and darker than mine. A bottle of fancy conditioner sitting on the counter that I'd never used in my life, some pricey brand I'd never even heard of. And then the kicker, false eyelashes, just sitting there like a little calling card. My chest tightened because Nicole was supposed to be gone by then. Why would her things still be here unless she planned on coming back? Unless this wasn't just some one-night visit like Zach had told me. I stood there staring at those lashes, and it all started falling into place. The distance. His nervousness when he first told me about Nicole staying over. The way he always seemed lighter, happier around her at family events. This wasn't about hosting his cousin for work. This was about him bringing another woman into our life, into the home that was supposed to be ours. I felt like the biggest fool for believing his story, for trusting him after everything we'd built. 5 years together, and he was sneaking behind my back, with his own cousin, no less. All those nights I felt something was off, all the instincts I'd pushed down so I could keep pretending to be the laid-back girlfriend, they came roaring back. I went back into the living room, shaking, and I snapped. His precious computer setup, the shrine he'd poured all his time into while ignoring me, I grabbed the monitor and hurled it across the room. The sound of it smashing was almost cathartic. Every night I'd sat alone while he clicked away, every moment he chose pixels over me, it all boiled over. Then I went for the rest. The keyboard. The mouse. All those expensive gadgets he'd obsessed over while making me feel guilty whenever I wanted to splurge on myself. After that, I tore into his closet with scissors. His designer jeans, his work shirts, the shoes he bragged about buying, I shredded all of it. Because that's exactly what he had done to us. Torn 5 years apart for some twisted fling with Nicole. Each cut felt like justice, like proof he couldn't escape the consequences of what he'd been doing behind my back. And the whole time, I couldn't stop picturing how he must have been plotting this for months. Probably venting to her about me, spinning me as the controlling girlfriend while making himself sound misunderstood. I could just imagine the two of them laughing about how clueless I was, how easy it was to trick me with his family obligations cover. So when Zach walked in and caught me mid-rage, the audacity of him acting shocked nearly broke me. He started yelling, telling me to stop, calling me insane, threatening to call the cops, as if I was some stranger who broke in, instead of the woman who'd stood by him for half a decade. I slapped him hard, because someone needed to wake him up to what he'd done. He grabbed my wrists, eyes cold, and told me to leave or he'd involve the police. The way he looked at me, it was like I was nobody. I tried to explain, to show him what I'd found, to make him understand why I was so hurt. But he wouldn't hear it. He just kept repeating that I was dangerous, that I'd crossed the line, like I was the one destroying us. You trashed my computer, Eden. You ruined my clothes. What the hell is wrong with you? He screamed, as if a few $1,000s in gear mattered more than the fact that he'd been lying to me. I tried to point to the evidence, the hair, the conditioner, the eyelashes, but he brushed it all off like it was nothing. That's from Nicole. She stayed one night. I told you that. But he couldn't explain why her things were still there. Why there was so much. Why it all felt so settled, like she'd been there far longer than a night. So I left. But not before making it very clear what I thought of him and his cousin. I went home and broke down, crying for hours. Then I did what I always do. I fought for us. I texted him, pouring my heart out, apologizing for his broken stuff, telling him I'd replace everything if he'd just be honest with me. I explained how betrayed I felt, how much it hurt, and begged him to talk so we could work through it. And what did he do? He blocked me. 5 years together, and he cuts me off like I'm some random crazy ex instead of the only person who's ever loved him like that. So I had my friends message him, trying to get him to see reason. They told him I was just hurt, that I'd acted out of fear, that people do extreme things when they're terrified of losing someone they love. Kayla even offered to mediate between us, but apparently he blocked them too. Soon after, I heard from mutual friends that he'd changed his locks and moved out, crashing at Tyler's place. Like I was some threat, not the girlfriend who'd been by his side for years. Tyler let it slip that Zach was acting like he needed protection from me instead of just facing me like a man. I couldn't wrap my head around it. How he twisted the story to make me the villain when he was the one betraying us. Since when was smashing a few replaceable objects worse than cheating? About a week later, I tracked down Tyler's place and showed up with two of my closest friends for support. I just wanted to talk, face to face, and make him understand that what I found in his bathroom wasn't normal. That he couldn't just erase 5 years without giving me real answers. But he wouldn't even open the door. Just yelled that he'd call the cops if we didn't leave. My friends tried to reason with him, told him I was sorry, told him I just wanted closure. Kayla even offered to wait in the car while I spoke to him alone, to prove we weren't trying to gang up on him. But he acted like we were some threat, like we were stalking him, when all I wanted was a conversation. Then Tyler came out and told me flat out that Zach didn't want to see me. That I needed to move on and get help. Like I was some unstable case, not a woman fighting for the man she loved. 2 days later, a police officer knocked on my door, with a restraining order. Zach had gone to court and painted me as dangerous, like he was the victim. The officer explained I couldn't contact him anymore, not directly, not through anyone else. I wasn't allowed near his work or his new place. I couldn't even drive down his street without risking jail, like I was some obsessed stalker instead of his girlfriend who only wanted answers. I tried explaining to the officer that it was all a misunderstanding, that Zach had clearly been influenced by Nicole into painting me as the problem. But cops don't care about relationship messes. They just hand you papers and walk away. This officer, a middle-aged guy who looked at me like I was already guilty, gave me the documents and warned me that breaking the order was a serious offense. I even called a lawyer to see if I could fight it, but Zach had already built his case. Photos of everything I destroyed, records of my texts and calls. He'd turned me into the aggressor on paper. The lawyer, a woman who spoke to me like I was a reckless teenager, said the best option was to stay away and hope he'd eventually drop it. As if 5 years of my life meant nothing. "Miss Chen," she said in that clipped, patronizing voice, "your boyfriend has evidence of property damage in the thousands, proof you showed up uninvited, and repeated attempts to contact him after he told you to stop. The court views this as escalating behavior." But what about his lies? His gaslighting? His secret with Nicole? None of that mattered because I was the one who finally cracked. My friends were furious for me. They couldn't believe Zach would take it this far legally instead of just sitting down and talking. Some wanted to keep reaching out to him, but I had to shut it down. I couldn't risk dragging them into trouble too. It was humiliating, having to explain why I couldn't even say his name on social media without worrying about court violations. People started looking at me differently, like maybe I really was the crazy ex he'd made me out to be. They didn't see the betrayal. They didn't see how I fought for us while he slipped away to Nicole. It's been 14 months since everything blew up. And honestly, I'm done pretending this was all on me. Zach got what he wanted. He pushed me out, and if I had to guess, ended up with Nicole, probably the plan all along. The restraining order expired last month, which just proved he didn't feel threatened anymore. But by then it was meaningless. I had to rebuild my life while he got to move forward like our 5 years together had never happened. I moved out of the old neighborhood because too many people there knew the story and looked at me like I was unstable. I lost friends who chose his side, who believed his version that I was abusive instead of seeing me for what I really was, betrayed and gaslit. My family keeps telling me to take responsibility and move on, but they don't get it. Zach engineered the whole thing. He set Nicole's visit up. He left those traces for me to find. And when I reacted exactly how anyone would after discovering betrayal, he weaponized it against me to cut me out of his life for good. That's not me being crazy, that's him being calculated. Last week, I ran into him for the first time in over a year. Grocery store, produce aisle. He looked better than I'd ever seen him. Fresh haircut, nicer clothes, carrying himself with confidence. And he wasn't alone. A blonde woman stood beside him, laughing at something on her phone while he picked apples. They moved around each other like it was routine, like they'd been together a while. My stomach dropped. I ducked into the cereal aisle before he could see me, but watching them hit me like a truck. Maybe I'd been right the whole time. Maybe Nicole was just the start. Maybe he'd been planning his exit for months before that night I found the evidence. The hardest part is how easily everyone believed his story. How quickly people forgot about the 5 years I gave him, always putting him first, always holding us together when he pulled away. No one remembers that. They remember one bad night when I finally broke after finding proof of what he was doing. But I don't feel sorry anymore. I don't regret fighting for myself, for refusing to just be erased and replaced. If he wanted someone else, he should have been honest enough to break up with me first, instead of turning me into the villain when I caught on. The restraining order wasn't about safety, it was about control, about silencing me so his side was the only one that mattered. And it worked. He got to be the victim, and I became the cautionary tale. Sometimes I still drive by his old place. Not because I want him back, but because I need to remind myself that it all really happened. That the signs were real. That my instincts weren't wrong, even if everyone else thinks I overreacted. The new tenants have different curtains now. And sometimes I wonder if they even know what those walls saw, if the landlord had to repaint to cover up the wreckage. Mostly, though, I think about how 5 years of my life got reduced to one police report and a few legal documents. How fast love can be twisted into evidence when the person you trusted most decides you're disposable. And how the real betrayal isn't breaking someone's things, it's convincing them they're crazy for noticing when everything they built together is collapsing right in front of them.